federal relief and assistance that we have been providing has included FEMA providing $750 for folks who need immediate needs being met, such as food, baby formula, and the like.
قاعدين بنلعب بالجوال انا ومعبود اداني القصبت والدخن كلها طلعت علي وانا قاعد بحكي الباقي مع معبود والرضا ما جاب تم كله وبعدين الجرقة وقع ضهري بعدين بابا اجى اخذنا وماما راحت تجيب وعملت تتخذ وكل الرضا وقع عليها.
اخوتك موجودين معك كلهم؟
لا
طب مين ضايل مش موجود؟
ولا عدا ولا حمد.
حمد وينه؟
بعرفش.
شو بيقرب لك حمد؟
ابن عمتي.
ابن عمتك؟
Get ready for a long ass. If you know my monologues, bro, they go on.
Do your thing, bro. Do your thing.
All right. Hello and welcome to Colonial Outcasts, the anti-imperialist abomination that George Bush, Obama, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and Trump would have put on a watch list to protect the elite's corporate nation. Today is election day, but we're not going to focus on that because the elites get enough reverence as it is, and I can't think of a better way to commit sacrilege against the neoliberal order than to focus instead on the citizens and subjects of the empire who are suffering under its hypocrisy. Also, I do not honor or respect the office of the presidency, not because of me being a dirty anarchist that I am, but because I respect the ancient laws and order of this territory. This is Turtle Island, and it was always meant to remain an anti-hierarchical, rotating democracy, but now it has turned into a corporate, feudalistic, fascist technocracy. And speaking of watch lists, today we are going to be talking about elite panic, Hurricane Helene, and transcultural solidarity with Palestine. As some of you know, I am a self-identifying redneck of colonial blood. I was once a Christian nationalist Zionist with philo-Semitic dreams of joining the IOF and becoming one with Israeli society. That didn't happen, though. Instead, I found a brotherhood with Palestinian Muslims and discovered that their culture and patriotic love for their land resonated more with me than the neoliberal and neocolonial tyranny of Israeli society. And I am not the only redneck out there who came to similar conclusions about Palestine. Hurricane Helene has caused many epiphanies to bubble up to the surface for my backwoods, red-blooded, shooting beer cans in the backyard redneck brothers and sisters. Most notably, the simple realization that the U.S. government is ran by depraved elites who do not care about us Americans. And therefore, the elites prioritizing of Israel over the victims of Hurricane Helene may be related, just maybe related, to the disregard of Palestinian victims. And we may be fighting the same fight. Imagine that. Imagine the struggle of Americans against their government being related to the struggle of patriotic Palestinians against Israel's tyranny. Elite panic is a term used to describe a common reaction by those in positions of power, such as government officials, corporate leaders, and other authorities during crises or disasters. It reflects a fear-driven, often authoritarian response where elites assume that the general public will react to disaster with chaos, violence, and irrational behavior. Believing they must maintain order, they may take drastic measures, including withholding information, restricting freedoms, and using aggressive control tactics, which can exasperate issues rather than alleviate them. This concept contrasts with evidence showing that, though, in many cases, regular people tend to respond to crisis with solidarity, mutual aid, and cooperation rather than panic. As we've seen in Gaza, the same thing. People come together and help each other out, just like Americans do in disasters. But in this particular case of elite panic, we are going to focus on the elite's fear that citizens will work together in mutual cooperation, independent of government assistance that may threaten their public perception of being needed and thus losing their monopoly of public dependence on them. To help build a bridge on this topic and Palestine, I invited, if you don't mind me using the terminology, a fellow redneck, Jason Higgins, a constitutionalist who formed a group of preppers. Jason was born in Alexandria, Louisiana, of traditional country, semi-city upbringing. Parents of boomers, largely left to learn and explore without restraint, taught to hunt, fish, learned to be street smart, and how to be stupid. I like that. Now, he formed a group, which I'm going to allow him to talk about, But first, I want to welcome you on, and I want to thank you for offering to form this, what I like to call like a bridging episode, bridging two worlds, red-blooded heartland Americans and the struggle of oppressed groups worldwide, most notably indigenous groups, including Palestine. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, man. It's definitely my pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. It's my pleasure to have you. I've been anticipating this episode for at least a month now. We were gonna have you on before the hurricane hit, but the fact that we're having this episode after the hurricane hit, I think it's better this way. You happen to have volunteered work in the disaster relief and during Hurricane Helene. But before I get into that, can you tell me about your philosophy? In this movement, we should be embracing all handshakes of solidarity if those handshakes clearly oppose racism and supremacy, empire, colonialism, and oppression. Now, while we see very clear alliances and camaraderie with communists, Marxists, socialists, and anarchists for Palestine and other groups as well, conservative groups, liberal groups even, one group has gone overlooked, and that is constitutionalists. A growing number of constitutionalists are joining in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle against Zionist occupation and the sadistic mass murder of those beautiful ancient people known as Palestinians. So can you help the audience who may not know what a constitutionalist is? Can you define it in your personal terms? I could pull up like a Webster's dictionary version, but I want to hear your version of what you see that as.
A current day constitutionalist. Well, for me, it's somebody that has taken the time to understand the fundamental principles that this country was founded on. It's not so much about the Constitution as it is the principles and the framework in which this country was set up, the principles that framework were borrowed from. Hope we can touch on that a little bit later.
Yes. But, can we touch on it now for a second, real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's touch on that real quick, if you don't mind.
Okay. Well, like, for instance, I had some time to, while I was trying to figure out a non-violent way to make the corrections that I felt like needed to be made, especially in our federal aspect of this country, what I came up with was the best way to combat what was taking place in DC. What I needed to do was I needed to go back and do some research on the people that came up with this constitutional republic idea, self-governance. And in that research, I found that it was largely the Iroquois Confederacy that had allowed Thomas Paine and large to spend some time with them, and he borrowed a lot of the Iroquois Confederacy law of the land governance system that they had set up, and that played a huge role in how the up and coming 13 colonies, now America, would be framed constitutionally, and what a constitution actually is. What purpose does it serve? So to answer your question, what is a constitutionalist these days? I think that can be termed in many different ways. There's so many different ideologies on what a constitutionalist is. Yeah. For me, it's just about the truth. That's all I've ever sought in everything I've ever done is the truth. I've just always been after the truth, whether it had been spiritually, politically, just about myself. I've sought the truth. And like they say, the truth will set you free. Well, in this case, the truth will set you on fire. It will infuriate you whenever you learn what this experiment was supposed to be and what has happened to it. Precisely.
Yeah. The in research and being fascinated with the Confederacy of the Iroquois myself, I was just amazed at how they had perfected, to the closest I've seen in human history, the art of democracy. Their way of putting checks and balances that is far more superior to what we have now, or even what the founding fathers established. The way that they did was a rotating democracy. There was no presidency. There was no hierarchy. There was chiefs selected by their nations, which a nation, you can swap that out with state, town, region, whatever you want, however the chips fall, and they would come under a middle ground, a Switzerland, a Geneva, known as the Council Fire, which was maintained by the peacekeepers, which was a specific tribe, and their job was to simply moderate and arbitrate between the representation of these chiefs who were selected by the women, also known as the clan mothers, and they would be swapped out. If they weren't doing their job, the people would swap out those chiefs. So there was no president, there was no hierarchy. It was very democratic and it was very free. Freedom was the ultimate aspiration, and working in harmony with nature, working in harmony with each other, and also not forcing assimilation, so that if people wanted to be unique and a little separate, they had the freedom to do that instead of being forced in it. And it was a prevention of corruption. So I hold it on a pedestal in my head, and I think that we should aspire to come back to that as citizens and inhabitants of Turtle Island. We should aspire to go back to that age, as opposed to seeing them as simply a relic of the past. Oh, something we go visit in a museum. Oh, that's so amazing that they did that. That's cute and adorable, but our shit's superior. It's a form of supremacy. But that we'll move on from that, though, because I could talk about that forever. I want to talk about so you put together a prepper group that embraces very core principles of constitutionalism. As a result of this hands-on approach that you have taken to life and your fellow countrymen, you decided to go help out in the disaster relief after Hurricane Helene. So Hurricane Helene, it made landfall on September 26, 2004 as a Category 4 storm with 140-mile-per-hour winds, and it caused widespread devastation in the southeastern United States. We're going to be focusing on the devastation it did in Appalachia, which was hit the hardest. Chimney Rock, other regions, North Carolina, Asheville, Western North Carolina. We're going to be focusing on those particular areas because those were the hardest hit. What did you see there? Tell me about your experience in this disaster relief. What did you do? Tell me, take a step 1 to step 2 to step 3 of what you did, your experience viscerally, if you can.
Okay. So yeah, whenever the storm rolled through, initially there wasn't any, Florida was impacted the worst by the actual hurricane. And so whenever the conversation started coming in about possibly going and assisting this group that you talk about we have here locally, it's largely a emergency service, emergency search and rescue. I've strongly encouraged everyone within the group to go get all the first responder training that's available. So a lot of these people already are very qualified in that area. And I can't really go any further into it than that. But it was originally Madison, Florida that we were asked to go and assist in. It had been hit pretty hard by the actual hurricane. And that is where that's where the effort was going to be sent to. However, within a day and a half, I think 2 days of whenever the storm had stalled out in North Carolina is when we heard about the flooding that happened. Started seeing the footage of what happened after the dam broke. And I made the decision at that point in time, independent of any team local to Louisiana, to head up to that area. I had some friends of mine, some contacts that I've made throughout the years. I was going to meet up with them, and we were just going to get there and just do the best we could, try to do any search and rescue efforts that we could possibly do, offering type of medical assistance, supplies, food, just anything that we can do, you know. On my 13, 14-hour drive straight there without a break, I actually lost contact with the group I was supposed to meet up with. And so for about a 4-hour period, I was heading there with no one to meet up with. But thanks to a really good friend of mine out of Kentucky, I was instructed where to meet up with a gentleman. He didn't give me permission to use his name. I did ask earlier, but he hasn't responded yet. If he does give me permission, then, you know, of course I'll. But anyway, I met up with him, and I was blown away by the work that this guy was doing. But before I get into that, to take you through the steps, as I'm immediately pulling into a little town that's southeast of Asheville. I don't recall the name of the town exactly. You gotta forgive me. There's so many small towns, and
yeah,
we get so many.
Appalachia has, yeah, it's just peppered with all kinds of different towns with all kinds of unique names.
Absolutely, it's. Whenever I originally got there, it was a little small town, southwest of southeast of Asheville. But I was immediately instructed to head to Asheville, where the airport was. There was a team operating there using civilian aircraft that were doing aerial search and rescue. Basically, what they were doing was go into landslides and pulling people out of vehicles who had gotten trapped in their vehicle in a landslide. They were short, some EMS personnel, so I volunteered my services. So my first day, as I'm pulling up to the area, I'm literally, getting out of my SUV, and I got my med bag. I'm trying to change clothes and everything all at the same time because they're waiting on me. The bird is humming. They're ready to go. They're literally waiting on me. Run, jump in the bird. We take off. And the entire first day was spent just doing, like I said, search and rescue. We recovered 13 people on day one. It was an experience that was unique to me. I'd never done aerial search and rescue like that before, where you're hoisted down from a bird. And these are civilian helicopter pilots who did, in my opinion, a phenomenal job. 13 people on day one. Everything's moving so fast that you don't have time to stop and think about what's going. You're just reacting, muscle memory, which I didn't I didn't have muscle memory as far as doing this particular type of operation. So it was very much a learning experience for me, but it was moving so fast that you don't have a chance to think about it until after the fact. I'm not sure I really have sat down long enough to think about it. That was day one. Day two, the morning of day two, I did only one flight, and whenever we came back in, the EMT for that group had arrived, and so I was free to go. At which point in time, I went and met up with the contact that I had initially been set up with, and while spending some time with him that evening, and me trying to take a little bit of a breather and realizing I haven't eaten in 2 days. I maybe had 3 hours of sleep altogether. I was watching him on his phone, coordinating so many groups from all over the place, from every state that you could imagine. Volunteers, volunteer groups, people trying to bring in supplies, just people trying to help in any capacity whatsoever. For some reason, he became the beacon that all this information was being channeled through. And he did an amazing job on getting information out to these people about which roads to use, updates about, hey, this road is open now, it's closed due to construction, route this way if you're coming from this part of the state, this is the road to use if you come north. He was doing the work, in my opinion, of what we have an entire governmental organization that's supposed to do, but he was single-handedly doing it. And he did it tirelessly.
Yeah.
what time I spent with him, I was astonished with the work that he had done. By the time I'd gotten up there, you got to realize I'm 3 years in, well, 4 years into this. I was a little jaded. I'm not gonna lie. I was starting to get to the point where I was starting to experience fatigue and burnout with this struggle and this fight. But being there, watching what these locals were doing, what this individual was doing, what groups were doing, despite what was being threatened, just watching the American spirit actually thrive. I needed to see that it was still alive, that we still had that capability here within this country, and it very much exists. It absolutely reinvigorated myself.
Now, thanks for telling me that and walking us through that. Before I get into the fears that you guys had faced, I also want to create a comparison, a relation with what we've seen come out of Gaza. When you watch videos of a bomb hitting an apartment building or a school full of Palestinians, and then you see adults just running into the rubble despite being conscious of the fact that a bomb could be following up with that, do you see similarities in that cooperation? Do you see a sense of camaraderie that comes as a result of loving your fellow citizen? Were you able to relate to that? Did that stand out in your mind when you, because I know that you watch a lot of videos coming out of there. What did that have any type of psychological effect in viewing those two things together?
As a matter of fact, it did, Mark. Prior to what happened in North Carolina, I had agreed to work with Veterans Demand Ceasefire, which has been a huge honor. I'm not a veteran, so and I made that known initially whenever joining the group, and I thought it was pretty funny because a few people immediately said I should get the boot. Those people have since become really good. I would say good acquaintances of mine. We talk and joke online quite regularly.
Yep, I see that.
It's been a huge honor. Prior to North Carolina, what was happening in Gaza was very much in my peripheral vision. I was laser focused on what was wrong with the U.S. I knew this was happening. There were things that I knew I would need to cover eventually, but I felt like what was happening at home was of the utmost importance. But there was a moment in North Carolina. It was, I think, after day 4, maybe night 5 or something like that. It's kind of a blur, where I was able to get to a makeshift comms facility that was just south of Chimney Rock. We had spent the entire night rebuilding our roadway that had been washed out, and by we, I should say one gentleman and his Bobcat. This guy was like a magician on that Bobcat.
Do you have footage or photo? Do you have photographs or footage of this?
Yeah, I have videos of it. Yes,
makeshift. Okay, I'm gonna make a note to put that in post so that people can visualize what you're describing.
Yeah, I have videos. I did a very poor job of documenting my entire experience up there, but it was all happening so fast. 3 days has gone by before you realize you haven't even eaten, and the only reason that you notice you haven't eaten is because somebody's eating something close to you, and you're like, "Goodness gracious, like I'm starving."
I know. I look at these Gazans as they're starving and they're trying to help out their fellow citizens while they're starving to death. It's insane. It's insane, the superhuman abilities that they have been able to bring themselves to for the sake of their fellow human being in Gaza. But yeah, keep going to what you were saying about how there's a moment. Tell me about that moment.
That moment was the entire time I was up there. There was a lot of pushback about the relief efforts. It was so bad, it got to the point where all the county sheriffs got together and issued a memo stating that if there was any federal interference in any of the search and rescue efforts, that to notify them, and they would come remove that federal interference. And if that wasn't enough, they would deputize everybody in the effing state, to put it quite frankly how it was stated.
Yeah.
What became evident to me was that there was no assistance coming in other than people that were fellow Americans who were putting their life on hold. Whatever they had going on, they had to stop and set aside, and they rushed to this to go offer any assistance they could. And like I said, when I was at this makeshift facility, I had an opportunity to check in back at home, check in with everybody to check in with. But I also got a video of, and it enraged me. It was when this entire, I think it was a school. No, it was an entire town, I believe, had gotten obliterated. So it was a large area. It had been just completely obliterated. There's been so much damage over there. It's hard to keep track of what's what. But it was a schoolyard. It had gotten hit, right? So as you see that this damage has been inflicted on everyday normal human beings, that other human beings in the area are flooding in to assist, regardless of what danger may exist, and the same thing that we're living in North Carolina at this time. And it dawned on me that we have more in common with these people than we have that's different. And then it also occurred to me through the years of research that I've poured into America, the Constitution, Declaration, how all this is supposed to work as a constitutional republic, what is standing in the way of that operating correctly. It dawned on me that it was all related. It's all interconnected.
Yeah. There is that moment where you saw the devastation, people working together.
Yes.
And in the peripheral, you've seen images and video footage coming out of Gaza about them working together under bombardment, starvation, snipers.
I followed it.
And you had that moment. How after that moment, how different were you? How different were you in your outlook on everything on a global scale?
Wow, you can ask anybody in the IPC or definitely within Veterans Demand Ceasefire. I was on fire. I couldn't believe that we weren't, as a country, doing something about this. I was 100% for putting boots on the ground. I was enraged. I wanted to put together a team myself and get over there and help these human beings, these Palestinians that were just being, and still are being slaughtered. If I don't see how anybody can see it any differently. I don't care what lens you view it through. These are humans, they're the same species as you and I. They deserve the same rights to be able to live without oppression, without waking up that day wondering if they're gonna be killed or if their child's gonna be blown to bits. And they deserve the same thing every other human on this planet deserves, which is an opportunity to wake up that day and just try to be the best version of themselves, to try to better humanity, to get closer to what was largely considered primitive hundreds of years ago, but has now proven to be light years ahead of what we have as any type of civilization today. And that's largely what the natives of America had. And I envy that. I have very much in my heart been drawn to that in the last couple of months. The law of the land with the Iroquois Confederacy, all these different tribes and how they interacted with each other and how they are in harmony with their environment around them, as opposed to being an absolute contrast. of what the environment is around them, you know, almost as if most of humanity is a cancer on this planet. I was very different after that moment, and my focus became broader because at that point in time, I noticed something, and that was there's a common denominator with everything that's happening in Gaza and Ukraine, with the information that's being fed through mainstream media, with the censorship of social media, which baffles me. I don't understand how propaganda is legal, but yet you can't say your opinion on social media, especially if it's counterintuitive to the narrative that those that want a certain narrative spin. I don't understand how that works. You know, how can you on main news outlets say the sky is purple, but you can't?
Yeah,
it's frustrating, and it's hard for me to vocalize that frustration. I'm sorry, but
if it's propaganda from the government, then it is declared fact. If it threatens the empire, then it is disinformation or misinformation, and therefore it must be censored. And that is where we came to. That's where we're at today. And I am so thankful for people like you who have not bought into that, who have pushed back and thought beyond the curtains and pierced behind the veil and behind the smoke to see what the reality is. And by the way you worded all that, there's a certain thing about the way you describe and the way you express yourself that is very powerful. And it just goes to my philosophy that we need everybody to have the ability to express themselves and how they feel without feeling like they're going to be judged or feeling like they're not qualified to do that. The Zionists have done a great job at trying to keep everybody in their own little box and corner and keeping everybody isolated from each other. Rednecks can't talk about Palestine. Rednecks can't go against the propaganda of Israel. Rednecks can't go against the narrative. But as we can see today, that those walls are crumbling. And as one thing I am thankful for that's happened lately. Now, that being said, and now that we covered that, and I appreciate you expressing that, let's address this video real quick. I'm going to bring this up to the stage, and we're going to talk about it.
If you need them, they're gone. So Congress did not approve a $10 billion increase to FEMA's budget while we're in the middle of a hurricane. Okay, they didn't add it. They said no. So essentially they're cutting FEMA's budget. And now they're on recess for the next 6 weeks. Did you know that? Did you know that the United States Congress, they're not there right now. If you need them, they're gone. Okay, they are on recess for the next 6 weeks. This is their schedule. Okay, do you see this? They just got back from summer break not long ago, and now they're on another 6-week break while people are stuck still. Okay, so this hurricane is bad. It is horrible. The south side of Atlanta got hit so hard. And we have a family friend who's doing search and rescue with helicopters. There's people in North Carolina who still don't have power, who still don't have water, who are stuck. Like, just absolutely stuck. People are fighting over food. People are fighting over resources. It's getting bad. And they cut FEMA's budget and left.
So the Red Cross is pulling their shelters out of North Carolina, basically giving the survivors who have nothing left a swift kick in the teeth. Then North Carolina Child Protective Services says if you don't have a safe and secure place to take your children, we're going to take them from you. But it's not just the people in these shelters that need to be concerned. If a mental health worker comes to interview you, and you as a homeless disaster survivor pour your heart out to this mental health professional, including how hard it is to take care of your children in these times, they're going to have a solution for you. But it's not going to be one you're going to like. They're going to take your children as a ward of the state. But why does the state of North Carolina want to take these children into custody and place them in the foster care system while doing absolutely nothing for their parents, I might add? The answer is there is a massive state and federal funding that creates a huge motive to seize these children, while little to no funding is available to help their parents, especially with their housing issues. How the fuck is this happening in the United States? Why is the answer separating families instead of just reevaluating funding to help?
But they got funding to send Israel billions of dollars worth of weaponry to blow up children. Interesting. Now we're going to move on to possibly an even more disturbing accusation and rumor that has been confirmed, I believe.
Approaching a massive installation. We actually got some drone footage of this the other day. And it's a camp that popped up in a matter of days. We actually stopped by some of the locals that live around here, and we were asking about it, and they said it's a FEMA camp and it's being leased. It's property that belongs to a trucking company, they thought. It's owned by the Smoky Park LLC. I'm gonna flip the camera around here in a minute, but it's got armed guards. And it is a massive installation that literally, according to the residents that live around here, that have eyes on it because they overlook this property, it popped up in a matter of days. They've got climate-controlled trucks and trailers, I should say. It's pretty well organized. It's got one entrance in and one entrance out. So we're walking in and we're going to ask them live who they are, what they're doing here. Are they under government contract? Is it FEMA? And they're putting a tornado shelter in here apparently. Got a delivery. So stick with us. We're going to figure out what's going on. Maybe I can slide it with this truck. They won't see me. Hi. I'm Ann Vandersteel with Steel News.
Okay.
I'm live right now, and I'm just wanting to find out what y'all are doing here and who's organizing and who's actually got the property under lease.
Okay. Give me 1 second, and I'll go ahead and just get some supervisor to come out here and speak to you.
Okay. Are you guys private security?
Yes, ma'am.
You are? Who's your contract with?
Strategic Security Corps.
And who do they contract with?
Let me call it.
Do you guys know who your contractor is?
We'll be able to answer all your questions for you. Who'd you say you're with, ma'am?
Steel News?
Roger. I'm Sean, executive producer. Come on up. Come on up. All right, he's coming out to speak with you guys, ma'am.
Okay. Ann Vandersteel.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. This is my producer, Sean.
Hey, Sean, nice to meet you.
We're with Steel News. We have been on the ground for the last couple of weeks, wondering what it is y'all are doing, and because FEMA's had, they said they were pulling out because of militia and stuff, which that was debunked. So we just want to get the truth out because people are kind of like all over the place.
Understood. Yes. Yes, definitely understandable. We are definitely not pulling out. We are actually building this for our responders,
okay,
for FEMA responders, other federal agencies. We have several of these sites around the area,
okay,
to help volunteer agencies as well that need lodging, that are coming in to help the survivors in the local area for the operation.
And so how many responders will you house here, and how long do you think your response will be?
We're building this to come up to 700 people.
Okay.
And right now, how long it's going to be, we are unsure.
Okay.
It's really an unknown number for us.
Are they
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
It was through we do have contracts, standing contracts for these that we then do task orders off of. So I will have to get back to you if I can.
We're hearing a lot of eyewitness accounts that FEMA has been preventing Americans who have volunteered to bring in aid, whether it be through trucking or personnel or just people on pickup trucks to come in and provide food, water, medical supplies, and they're getting stopped by FEMA or federal agents or unidentified agents and confiscating these supplies and not distributing them to the people they're intended to go to, while at the same time not distributing their own supplies to the people who are affected. We're going to hear the response to this. What's fascinating is if you search on YouTube, FEMA response hurricane Helene, you will, the first top results, of course, the first page will be flooded with quote unquote debunking videos. Now, we all know that whenever the government wants to push a certain narrative or maintain a certain narrative, One of the methods of doing that is by maintaining the top results to enforce the narrative that they want. So this was at one of the top results on YouTube.
Of disinformation about the federal government's response to Helene.
Stories about FEMA seizing trailers and draining tankers, and we're going, that is really not happening.
How does that impact workers on the ground?
It takes their focus away from what they're supposed to be doing when they're having to debunk this sort of stuff and explain to people, no, the U.S. government did not geoengineer the storm. But like I said, some people, they're going to believe it no matter what.
The water came and undercut all these roads.
We met Robert Saman in Green Mountain. He's a regional manager for FEMA. Robert Saman told us that these conspiracy theories are making it more difficult for them to get aid to people who need it.
Anytime that people are out there trying to sow mistrust in the government, it can impact people's recovery. You know, they may be more hesitant to call and register for assistance, which is disappointing. And it's sad that people would do that.
One of the persistent claims that is out there is that FEMA is giving people $750 and that's it. And that's actually untrue.
The $750 is part of our serious needs assistance program. That's just to get them started with their initial recovery. We're going to work with them to get them additional funds for other things that they might need, home repairs, things of that nature. The $750 is just the beginning.
Robert Saman told us about some of the ways FEMA and local officials are trying to fight disinformation.
Absolutely.
FEMA has set up a hurricane rumor response webpage debunking false claims like this one.
When it comes to the truth and when it comes to lies, when it comes to one claim versus another, there's always speckles of truth mixed with deception. Now, while not all the rumors may be true, some rumors may be true. And while some of the claims made by the federal government may be true, a lot of them may be deceptive. So I want to unravel that. I want to ask you firsthand if you are personally aware of whether or not the FEMA or federal agents or unidentified agents are confiscating aid and preventing Americans from working together. Quite personally, like judging from the federal government's behavior in this past year, especially regarding Israel and the Palestinians, I think it's fair to say we can't trust the government. The question is, are we going to trust our fellow citizens over the government? I am very stern and I am very adamant about driving this point home, that we need to start trusting each other before we start trusting the ones who have been appointed above us. Because simply based on their behavior, we have got to start trusting each other. We have got to start taking personal accounts seriously over the mainstream media and over official government statements. Like, as we've seen of like Matt Miller standing in front of, at the press, at the White House briefings, dodging questions and dodging the truth about what's happening in Gaza, for example. So can you untangle this for us, Jason?
I can speak from my own experience and what I know to be truth from groups that are still operating in North Carolina when it comes to these subjects specifically. From whenever I was there firsthand, all the way through just moments before you and I started this interview, I was still getting some information. I'll try to making a point of staying as up to date on this as possible, because I do believe that this very much does play into what we see in Gaza. It also has a role to play with what's happening in Ukraine. And there's a common denominator, and I'd like to get to that later. But what I can tell you is that while I was there was a large pushback from what few FEMA personnel were on the scene at the time. Now, keep in mind, I was there, I think maybe two and a half, possibly 3 days after the storm had hit and the dam had just broke, right? So I got there approximately 13, 14 hours after the initial dam water flooded through, which is what caused the damage, by the way, in North Carolina. It wasn't the hurricane. The water line had actually started receding prior to the damage that everybody sees that has happened. What I learned while I was there is that everybody who lives near a water area in North Carolina, they have what's called a go, no go line in their yard, on their porch, somewhere. There's a line. And it's very basic. When the water gets to that line, they know it's time to go. The water's below that line, they're okay. They had been watching that go, no go line, and it got pretty close, but it had started to actually recede before the dam broke north of North Carolina. And that, as everyone that I spoke with there put it, wall of water that shook the earth come rushing through and created the damage that we see. A lot of it you don't see. I have some footage that I'd be more than willing to give to you. I may have already sent it to you. I want to touch on a few things. The FEMA was very much not really, they had no footing there at the time that I was there. There was only a few people, and I only saw them at the airport the day, the evening and the morning that I was at the airport. That was the only time I had any interaction or saw anybody with FEMA. I think the top estimate was about 12 personnel at that point in time. Like I said, it wasn't too much longer after that. I was directed elsewhere. What's it called? An area in the very north part of North Carolina, something Pine, Stone Pine, maybe, I think it's called.
Okay.
Anyway, I had gotten a lot of personal phone calls, like people from back here in Louisiana, personal friends of mine said, "Hey man, there's a story on Facebook. It's going viral. There's these people up in Stone Pine, I think it's called. It's a town that's north of Burnsville. There's this woman who she was an elderly woman. There was people worried about her. Nobody had any contact with her, and there was supposedly about 20 or so other residents in this little community that had been completely isolated. Nobody had gotten to them yet. So after about a good 2.5 hour nap, which is doing pretty good for that point in time, I headed to that area personally. The intention was to get there and to go meet up with the team in Burnsville. By the time I got there, I think I was number 25 that had actually arrived on scene. The story had been so viral on Facebook. I was the 25th person by 8 o'clock in the morning to have gotten there. So that just goes to show the amount of effort that was being put in by locals and by community groups. The video that we watched that showed the FEMA camp being built, that was nowhere near there while I was there. I think that's probably 2 weeks after the fact. The entire time that I was there, FEMA was basically in a mall parking lot in a back corner. Really hard to find. There were a few people at the airport. I have some videos of what they were doing. Now, I'm not saying that these people are themselves terrible or that they are the enemy or that they purposely were wanting to stop any relief efforts. I have to believe that the people themselves, did or would want to sincerely help. I just think that what people aren't aware of is how government structure operates and how civilian or just everyday American people operate. It's very different. If you're not familiar with how the government operates and how, as opposed to maybe how things work at where you work at, it's a very different process. They definitely were not helping. They definitely were trying to shut us down for 4 or 5 days until all the sheriffs stepped in. That seemed to quiet everything down for a while. The rest of my stay there, I had no contact with anyone within FEMA. Whenever I got to Burnsville, you couldn't go a block without there being an area where people were setting up supplies, food, water, just anything anyone could need, and people were coming in, gathering supplies, getting them to wherever they need to be. I personally worked with a team that would gather as many supplies as we could and would get in a bird. These are small choppers, so not very many people, and then not a lot of weight. But we would airlift to an area and we'd trek into a little community. There wasn't any interference with that, but I did learn just a couple of days after I left, and I got sent probably a couple hundred videos of some helicopters that would come down into Burnsville and seemingly intentionally would just, with the rotor wash. I don't know if anybody, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with helicopters. I definitely am. I take one to work every day. The rotor wash is quite powerful. These helicopters descending on these areas where there were supplies for anyone that needed them to come and get them, and it just throwing stuff everywhere. One of the incidents involving a Chinook, which was National Guard. Now, I don't know what the story is with that. I would have to believe that there was a reason for a Chinook to try to come down where it did, in the manner it did, some type of emergency, but I have not been able to get any information on that. What I can confirm is that there were unmarked SUVs riding around. These SUVs showed up usually just moments prior to any of the helicopter incursions that happened. There were some people that were injured in the helicopter incursions, and there was no rhyme or reason to it. There was nothing I was able to find as an official statement from any official organization as to why this had even happened. I can tell you that did take place. I can also tell you that facility that was being built, 700 beds. Okay, you got Strategic Security Corps. Okay. Well, that also pops up somewhere else. There is let's see, I got it right here. Greensboro, North Carolina. There's a facility that it used to be some type of school institution, but there's been approximately $50 million of taxpayer funds. There we go. 50 million has been spent so far on what is called the Minor Migrant Facility. This Greensboro Reunification Academy for the Minor Migrant Facility. 50 million's been spent. There's been no activity there. If you dig into it a little bit further, the security force that is there is Strategic Security Corps, and it is funded by Puxon and Metabroad, which is a China-based company. Like I said, it has no activity. There's nobody there. There's over 800 beds, and it's not being used to help any of these affected by the damage that happened in North Carolina. It doesn't make sense on a lot of levels. Number one, why is there involvement from a Chinese company? Why has this been basically rented out by them? Why are there 800 beds not being used whenever that can go very far with a lot of people? Supposedly 700 beds at the FEMA facility that you showed in the video. Well, from everything that I have heard from everybody who is still on the ground in North Carolina, FEMA doesn't have any responders. That's not really their job. Their job is logistics. Now, I do know that they are coordinating with certain groups, but I haven't really heard a whole lot about effectiveness, efficiency, or nothing like that. It seems to me like if it wasn't for just everyday locals, just normal people, humans, or people that have had any type of first responder training, set their life down and went up there to go volunteer, and that's still happening on a daily basis. Or groups that exist there that have banded together in an effort to build housing, to get trees off of houses, to get supplies where they need to be, there's people there without any facilities. There won't be electricity put back into these areas for over a year. They need butane, propane, a way to stay warm. They're living in tents basically right now. Just any kind of supplies that can be sent are need to be sent, and supplies that are being sent, some of them are being confiscated. I don't know if that's the right term to use. I do know that the way FEMA operates is that they have a preferred vendors list. If that product or that food item is not on that preferred vendors list, they are not authorized to give it out.
But that has no jurisdiction over if citizens are wanting to distribute those supplies. That's if FEMA wants to distribute it. So the question is why? Why would they be stopping citizens from getting their own arbitrary aid in to other citizens outside of their jurisdiction? And have you, now this is from your experience, but you're also in contact with people who are currently there over right now who have been there longer than you. What is the most extreme you have heard from them, from the people you personally know? And you don't have to name names. I just want
well, I mean, aside from the first day I was there, you know, you had headphones on whenever you're inside the helicopter so that you can hear each other speak. It's so loud. Well, while you have the headphones on, you can hear what the pilot is hearing. And I personally overheard, you know, calls coming from the airport. Someone who was threatening to strip us of all of our credentials, to strip the helicopter pilot of his license, to even take his aircraft from him if we did not stop what we were doing. Multiple accounts of that repeatedly. Fortunately, no one really, you know, listened to that because there were more important things to worry about, such as every moment spent worrying about something like that means that there's another moment someone was stuck in a situation that if we could get to them, we could save their life or impact it in some way that would be beneficial, as opposed to worrying about losing the credential because we're doing something that no one should have an issue with in the first place. It was really kind of baffling.
What have you heard coming out that has been to the extreme of stopping aid?
So whenever you speak of trust like that, I think it's important to note that trust, it is very short in supply these days. So whenever I do speak on something, it is only something that I can prove. I don't speak on speculation. If I am told something, I will vet it before I will speak on it publicly. Right. I think credibility is one of the main things that we have to make sure that we keep throughout this process of trying to figure out everything that's going on and how to move forward with it. But what I can tell you for sure is that there have been incidents where not just FEMA, but now Border Patrol with FEMA, and I have some videos that were sent to me. They are doing drive-throughs, drive-bys, or however you want to say it. They're going to each one of these supply posts, and they have shut many of them down. They've taken all the supplies from these posts. Nobody knows what they're doing with the supplies. I have zero accounts of someone living in North Carolina saying that they have received any type of food, water, medical assistance, anything from any organized group such as FEMA. The only assistance that I know of that's getting to people are the volunteers, the groups that are there on the ground, boots on the ground, going to town every single day, working themselves. I think I lost like 10 pounds in what few days I was there, and it's because you don't eat and you're constantly on the go. You don't realize
I know.
it. You come home and your wife looks at you like, "What the heck happened to you?" You know, like, "Wow, what's different?"
And you're dehydrated And you're
Oh, yeah.
dehydrated. That's one thing that I've known when I'm in these situations similar as I forget to drink water. And that's why you always have
Yes.
to, FYI, always have somebody there who's reminding you to drink water.
Well,
I was because you're not going to remember.
I was there in the EMS capacity. I went through every bit of hydration supplies I had. So you would think I would remember to stay hydrated, but that's not where my focus was.
Yep.
You feel guilty about even taking a nap because that's some time that could be spent trying to possibly save somebody. But to wrap this up, yeah, so there's accounts of FEMA and Border Patrol now. I don't know why they're involved, but they are. They're going to different areas. They're shutting it down. There was a gentleman that was working in conjunction with FEMA with his business, and FEMA has just basically just took his entire business and the property from him. They just took it, annexed it. He's gone. He's out of the picture. They control it all. You know, he is to exit the property. It is now underneath their control. I don't know what gives them jurisdiction to do so, but that has happened.
And here's the thing. I trust you. You trust them. There's a chain of trust. I've gotten to know you. We have repertoire to know that you confirm things first before you accept them as a fact. And because I trust your judgment and you trust the judgment of the people you talk to, it creates a chain of trust that, in my opinion, should take precedent over any official statement. And I believe we need to normalize that as a coalition of citizens and people around the world, regardless of the struggle. We need to start trusting each other and relying on each other instead of official statements, because in large part, it's kind of what got us into this mess anyways. It's kind of what got us into the state that we're in right now. The government has been very effective at degrading the trust that we have in each other and encouraging trust in them, which has led us to this world of deception that we now live in that has led to atrocities. Now, based on what you said, I'm going to play this video and I want you to respond to it. And I want you to pay close attention to what she's saying, because this is one of the official statements that I'm talking about.
What it does is it really affects the morale of our people who are trying so hard to get into communities. But the biggest effect, I would say, is people that have been impacted are afraid to apply for our assistance. Assistance that then they can get a hotel room. They can get reimbursement for some of the costs or damages to their home. If I can't get them to apply, I can't give them the money and the resources that they're eligible for. And we're hearing that people are afraid to apply for the assistance. And so we need them to know. I've heard rumors that if you take our $750 and don't pay it back, we're going to take your home. Absolutely false. The $750 gets you money to help with your medicine or the food you lost in your refrigerator. And then we're going to give additional money for the repairs to your homes and the items that were lost. We're going to help with any rental that they incur or any of the displacement costs if they went and stayed at a hotel. All of that reimbursed. But I can't.
Okay, so this is, my opinion, a clear example of a straw man's argument. She is honing in on certain rumors and ignoring other rumors, like the ones that you have just outlined. She's, and it's a very effective strategy. If there's rumors floating around or accusations or personal accounts that FEMA is confiscating aid and not allowing citizens to help each other, instead of addressing that directly, they will address some other rumor that's not pertinent to the subject at hand to distract the audience and be like, oh, well, there's nothing to see here. I guess these rumors are just, you know, unfounded. But that's not the rumor. The rumor is that they're confiscating aid. Now, I believe that they have released other statements denying that this is happening, but I don't trust them. I don't trust them for so many reasons, and neither should anybody based on what we've seen in the past year, especially after what we've seen in the past year. Now, this thing about the $750, it's a joke. It's similar to what was given to the family members in Lahaina after the Lahaina fire in Maui. What is your take on the official federal response denying these accusations? And then we're going to move on to another topic that's I want to hit before we wrap this up.
So about whenever the 750 was initially announced, I was there on the ground. Whenever it was first announced, it came on the just moments after an announcement from Kamala that FEMA was broke, or that the government was broke, that there wasn't any funds to do a whole lot with, in any type of effort. Moments after that kick in the face for the people of North Carolina, the 750 was released. And it was just like, hey, everybody's gonna get 750. And then maybe an hour after that, it was released that the 750 had to be applied for online. Well, there's hardly any phone service up there. Everywhere there's no phone service. There's nowhere that's indicated at this point in time where to go to apply. And then it's later found out, not even an hour later, another kick in the face, that the 750 is in the form of a loan. And if you read the small print, what she said, it may have been changed by now, by the time that video was released. But at the time that the 750 was initially released, for a fact, in the small print, it was as a loan. And if you don't pay it back by a certain amount of time, you lose all your property. Everything that you have is now in the custody of FEMA or the federal officials. That may very well have been changed since then. I don't know. But that was the case when I was there, without a doubt.
Okay. All right. And I believe you, and I trust you, and I accept that as fact over what's being told to us,
Oh,
and
I have the receipt.
I'm doing that to set a precedent. I know you do. You're very good at this. You're very good at keeping receipts and doing research and documenting these facts. And I'm just setting the precedent that I want the audience to start getting in the habit of trusting our fellow man, trusting our fellow human beings. So I'm glad you touched on this. Now we're going to move on to another subject that is also has been pertinent to this particular episode. As a constitutionalist, tell me about how your philosophy affects your view of the struggle of Palestinians against tyranny, against their form of tyranny that they're dealing with.
All right, so this is my personal take on it.
Mm-hmm.
This is years. I've spent 23 years studying ancient civilization history, geopolitical situations of that time frame, all the way up to modern times. And I'm glad I had that interest so long ago. It was an odd interest to have at such a young age, but I'm glad I had it because it's been very instrumental in what's happening today. You can take every situation from the Civil War through Lincoln, Kennedy's assassination, the Organic DC Act, the Federal Reserve Act, the attempt on Ronald Reagan's life, what's happening in Ukraine, the truth of why that is happening and what is actually taking place there, and the truth of what's happening in Palestine. There's a common denominator in all of this, and it's something that you can tie together quite easily when you have the puzzle pieces to put it together. And it's something that I call colonial imperialism. That is the backbone behind everything that we see going on today in every scenario, whether it's North Carolina, Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, you name it. There's one common denominator. The colonial imperialistic system has been flipped on its head. They messed up a long time ago, over 100 years ago, whenever this system took control. After the Civil War, America went bankrupt, and these private bankers were allowed to come in. This was their second attempt, by the way. They created their own set of definitions. This was all kept very hush-hush. The only ones that really knew about it were the ones that would benefit from it, the ones that were wealthy enough, 100, 120 years ago to be educated in such a way. And there is nothing I would put past these people to do to either regain control, or if that can't be done, completely glass just an entire planet, and have their great reset. You look at it in those terms.
Mm.
And that's my philosophy on what's happening.
Gotcha. So when did you start to become more privy to a more accurate picture of Palestine and the Palestinians? You mentioned we can't talk about that without talking about Josephine.
Yeah, you're right. The years prior to working with Veterans Demand Ceasefire, I had leaned on Josephine heavily while we were establishing the community group here. At that, and whenever it initially started, there were talks about her initially moving back to where I live at. This is her home area, and where she was going to be a part of it. She was supposed to be my community outreach person because I'm not really all that great at the community outreach part. But that didn't quite work out. But I still leaned on her very heavily in a lot of ways over those years. And
there's so much that none of us knew before October 7th. What was it that opened your eyes to the reality of what the Palestinians are going through?
I had issues with it from the very beginning.
Tell me about it.
I guess you could just say I'm a nerd. I like to research. I've studied the IDF. I've studied the wall, the border that Israel has with the West Bank and Gaza, but mostly the wall with the West Bank. That is the most heavily watched, best fortified wall border in the world. Okay, you can't have a bird land on that border without them knowing immediately. And I know from research that there is not a single place that can't be reached from A to B within 5 to 8 minutes. So whenever this attack initially happened, it didn't make sense to me. How could, number one, there be so much of an amassing of what would seem to be primitive, but still, very tactically sound weaponry established over a short or any period of time without it being known? How could this wall be breached without anyone knowing? How could an attack take place for so long when it only takes 5 to 8 minutes for any defense force to get from A to B? By one of the most lethal, best trained defense forces in the world, the IDF. Someone that at one point in time I used to admire, and now I very much hold in disdain. That didn't make sense to me.
Same here. I tried to join them. And looking back, and I'm like, woo, that was a bullet I dodged. And it was 20 years ago. One of my Palestinian friends told me. I remember the conversation. This is after I had formed a brotherhood with the Palestinians, over in Jerusalem, also known as Al-Quds. I told him, like, and mind you, I was getting over extreme Zionism at that point. I said, hey, I still want to join the IDF. And he's like, why? I was like, I don't know. Maybe I can be a good influence. Maybe I can be a positive force. And at the time I was, very evangelical. So I'm like, maybe I can spread the love of Jesus. Oh, but he said, Mark, that's not how it works. They're going to turn you into a murderer. They're going to put you in a scenario on purpose to make you compromise your values. And at that point, I will have lost a friend. And suddenly I got lazy and I'm like, yeah, it is a lot of paperwork and I got to go get my high school transcripts and blah, 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 blah. And I didn't join. And I look back on that, man. I look back on that and I'm like, damn, like that's how coming from my personal perspective of faith. I'm like, that is, if that ain't God stepping in to save my ass from selling my soul, then I don't know what is. I mean, I could have said yes and just signed right up and gone down a very dark road. But, man, it's hard not to believe in the divine when stuff like that happens, looking back in your life. But anyways, yeah, but I agree with you. It was I've been saying that from the beginning that October 7th, it was, to me, it's very apparent. And now more stuff is coming out that was allowed to happen to create a scenario in which they can use emotional appeal and get everybody geared up for a modern day Holocaust.
Something that I found interesting, I think it was the University of Columbia has recently done a DNA study of a DNA comparison of what would be considered like the original
Hebrews.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
And it turns out that there was over an 80% match in DNA with the Palestinians with that particular ancestral group compared to almost none or absolutely zero from
Ashkenazi. Ashkenazi.
Basically.
Yeah. John Hopkins study and a bunch. It was actually also a rabbi.
So you're aware of it,
John Hopkins study. Oh yeah. I've been saying this for years. For the past, I don't know, 10 years, I've been going down that rabbit hole and trying to let everybody know, hey, Palestinians, them Hebrews, and there's a rabbi. There was an Ashkenazi rabbi who performed this study, and he got drugged through the mud by Zionists and they published their own counter study to say that Ashkenazis are more Hebraic in DNA origin than Mizrahi Jews, who are Jews who essentially stayed in the Middle East and hail from that region. So it became obvious to me that there was a war of academia going on to maintain the narrative that the Israelis are the original indigenous inhabitants that has been debunked. And it's only now that it's really coming out. So when I'm seeing all these posts online, bringing up the fact that you just said, that you just outlined, I'm just like, man, I've been saying this for years, and it kind of digs me because my ego wants to come out and be like, I said that first, goddamn it. But anyways, now to keep moving on this vein, what were the forms of propaganda about Palestinians that started to become obvious to you? Besides the DNA, we covered that, but also their treatment and this mythology that Israel is this moral army and this force of stability in the Middle East and the only democracy in the Middle East or in West Asia. I mean, there had to have been an origin. There had to have been that one point that catalyzed your viewpoint on this. What was that?
I wish I could say I had one, Mark. I really do. My trigger point was I am pro-human. I don't believe that anybody should be subjected to what has been taking place. I find it hard to believe that an ethnic group of people would do something that was supposedly done to them in the past. I would love to tell you that there was a piece of propaganda or there was something that was said that gave me an aha moment and changed my mind. Over a period of time, I have come to, with all the research I've done in the past, with the research I've done today, and tying that in with this colonial imperialistic system and how it's just like a dying animal, fledgling arms going everywhere, and that's part of it.
Yep. A bear in its death throes.
Exactly. But there's also this bloodlust from Netanyahu. Go back and look at video over the decades where this man has so badly wanted to do this for so long, and he's hell bent on doing it. You know, it makes me sick that I live in the country that, and I'm trying to choose my words carefully.
It's okay.
What most people call our federal government, what I refer to as USA Inc., that they're sending. It's not really the funding that bothers me. Everybody says taxpayer funded, but our financial system doesn't actually work that way. It is the weapons that bothers me. It's the fact that they're okay with this taking place. It's the fact that there's not more Americans or people across the world than stepping up and screaming out in outrage about this taking place. Now, I can tell you that there are conversations happening now that were not being had just 3 months ago. That's a very encouraging thing to see. There has been, in my opinion, a large awakening by the masses this people from every country in the world sees it for what it is now.
Before we wrap this up, there's been obviously very strategic barriers placed to prevent red-blooded rednecks, constitutionalists from joining and finding solidarity with the rest of the movement, with, say, the leftists and whatnot. And it's been very, very effective. And I intend to destroy that wall in a very aggressive way through this episode. There's a lot of, people like yourself out there, good-hearted Americans who care about their fellow countrymen, who are not privy to what's happening in Gaza, or they're surrounded by propaganda that's pressed by Fox News, CNN, and there's an attempt to monopolize conservatives or constitutionalists and put them in one camp and keep them isolated from real information that's happening. What do you have to say to our redneck brothers and sisters who are being isolated from the real information about what's happening to the Palestinians?
I think it's important to point out that I can't help but feel within my soul that there is the using of biblical aspects to continue to have support for what Israel is doing, right? I've noticed that, even within my own family, there's a very large Christian. There's a lot of Christians in my family, and there's been a lot of internal confusion, but there hasn't been a lot of conversation about it within the family. And I think that's largely because in their hearts, people are feeling that this doesn't feel right. What I would do is I would encourage anyone that can feel that something's not right to just do some homework, do some self-education. The information is available out there. It is getting hard to find, but the information is out there. I have left myself available, probably way too available for people to reach out to the point to where I'm a little overwhelmed at times. I've made myself very accessible, and that has kind of backlashed at times on me. It's caused strains in different areas of my life, but it's worth it, in my opinion, because I don't think there's anything more important than the education of what is actually taking place, how we got to where we're at today, and what we can do, what provisions are there for us to be able to remedy and right the course. You talk about constitutionalists, learn your Constitution, read the Declaration, and understand the Declaration declares what we are as a country. Read the Constitution and understand that the Constitution is a contract between the people, we the people, and the people that are elected into positions to represent us. This is a contract as to how they're to behave and how they are to manage our affairs. And people need to understand what has transpired through history, how that has been flipped on its head. I just, self-education, that's really, or go find you a conspiracy theorist friend, someone that, that, who talks this crazy stuff and has been probably ostracized and
we all need them. Trust me. I played that role on this podcast for sure.
Oh man, I'm telling you,
I've been keeping a scoreboard. I've been keeping a scoreboard with Greg on how many conspiracy theories that were initially considered conspiracy towards the beginning of this year, and where I'm at now on the chart. Just put those points. I just like to do that to taunt Greg sometimes. But
where the term come from itself. I mean, that right there should tell you all.
Oh yeah, it was all it's a psyop itself. Yeah. To disregard. Now, so I want to end this. Jason, first of all, I want to appreciate you coming on here and expressing yourself, and it's so obvious we can see right through you, right to your heart, and that's what I love. That's what I love about Rednecks, man. We try to speak from the heart as much as possible, man, and it gets us in trouble. Yeah, but it gets us in trouble. But I feel like by exposing this side of the United States to this movement, this revolution, it's hopefully will create a bond. And that is the intention of this episode. I want to create a bond, a brotherhood between all factions within this revolution, from the leftists, from the communists, from the Marxists. And which, by the way, you have expressed to me that you appreciate those groups as well. You mentioned the Black Panthers to me one time and how much you admired them, and that meant a lot to me, because I'm like, thank you. This guy's right down my alley, you know, and I'm the same way. Jason, appreciate you, man. And I'm gonna end this with this statement. Family, anybody watching this, the elites do not want us to unify. They do not want us to help each other. They want us to see each other as enemies, as burdens. They want us to see each other as hindrances to our success and prosperity. So now that we know what they want, don't you want the opposite? Don't you want the opposite? And what are you going to do to accomplish that?
If I may, just one second, please, Mark.
Yeah.
One thing that I have learned over the last 4 years while trying to have this conversation with people is that I learned that while trying to inform people of what is actually taking place and why, it is just as important to paint a picture of what things could be if we were free of this. If we were free of profit off of crisis, if we were free of this imperialistic system that it's on its way out. We just need to usher it completely out the door and get it out of our backyard in DC. I completely just lost my train of thought, so you're going to have to edit that part out.
It happens to me all the time, bro. Hey, I'm glad I'm not alone. Welcome to the club, bro.
Oh man,
dude, that's another problem of being a redneck. We'll be going down some rabbit hole in our mind, and then we'll just be like, the fuck was I saying? So
yeah, I looked up and I saw something, and I completely thought about that for a second. I lost my train of thought completely,
bro.
But
dude, I saw a hummingbird. I was remember that day I told you I was gonna be heading out to the woods and to film a video, to record a video. I was in the middle of something important thought, and I saw a hummingbird, and I'm just like, I had to like rack my brain for a few minutes to get back to where I was. I feel you. But either way, man, the message came out. The message you just relayed came loud and clear, and
I hope so.
And the audience knows that.
There is a future we can build that is beautiful. It is free the way that we're supposed to be free. The potential is there. There is not a single person on this planet, unless they have had a hand in what has been done to usurp power or to inflict damage upon another human being, other than the ones that need to be held accountable. There's not a human on this planet that does not deserve an opportunity to have a future that can be created in any image that we see. And there's so many different images that it can be. And that's the beauty of it, is what can be used to divide us or be used as ways to prevent us from coming together. Those are actually strengths that we can draw off of each other and build such a beautiful world and society off of. That's the image that has to be painted, while at the same time allowing people on their own pace, but quickly, because time is of the essence, to learn what has transpired and how we got to where we're at today. And I will leave you to it on that note, man. Thank you for having me on.
Couldn't have said it better myself, brother. With that being said, family, thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys watched the whole thing. Love you, fam.